Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. So I have a question for you today, and obviously please leave your comments down below so that I will know what your opinion is. But do you, to what extent do we find ourselves versus creating ourselves, right? So to what extent do we figure out who we are? Because people always say, well, you need to find yourself. I guess meaning you need to figure out who you are. You need to kind of discover what really makes you tick. Your turn-ons, your turn-offs, that sort of stuff. A lot of times we say, I need to find myself. I need to figure out who I am. And then to what extent do we create ourselves? Is it that we're finding ourselves, or is it that we're creating who we are, or is it a little bit of both, right? So I'm going to try to talk about all three. Are we finding ourselves? Are we creating ourselves? Or is it a little bit of both, right? So I think to a certain extent, I know I agree with all of this. Let me kind of preface that and say that to to a certain extent, we are figuring out who we are. We're discovering who we are. And I think that is especially the case early on in our lives, especially those teenage years, those and maybe preteen years as well, when you're really starting to make sense of this is who I am, all right? You're starting to realize more in terms of what you're in tune with as a person as you're growing into those preteen and then your teenage years. I think we all kind of go through that process as we start to discover the things we like, what we don't like, really start to get more of a sense of self, right? So I think we start developing a sense of self in those early years. And I think at that point, as we're discovering our sense of self, that's when we're figuring out who we are. So by the time, I don't know, it happens at a different age for everyone, right? So I can't say by the time, because I think it happens, this sense of self and figuring out self happens at a different age for everybody, right? But I feel like there comes a time when it becomes, if not absolutely clear, but it becomes more clear or clearer that this is who I am. This is what I believe, right? And it's really the belief system. If you think about it, the fundamentals of what makes us who we are is obviously it is our belief system, and then based on what we believe, we then have an attitude, and then we have a behavior, right? And those are the three things that follow. So I think we develop this belief system. We start seeing the world for what it is, and then we place ourselves in that world, and we start assigning, we see what meaning is already out there and what people say this means and what someone says that means, and then we put ourselves in the middle of it, and then we start making meaning of all those different aspects of life, of culture, of religion, of relationships, of church, of work, and I mean, you name it. We start making sense of all of those things based on obviously how we were brought up, how we were raised, the communities that we came up in, the countries that we came up in, the culture, right? The culture within our home, the culture within our community, the culture within our society, or broader society, right? Then has an impact in terms of how we see self, right? Us in all of what is going on around us. So yes, I think to some extent we do find ourselves. Now when you get to the point where you have figured out certain things about you, what makes you tick, what you like, what you don't like, that sort of thing, I think then we start to create self, right? I think we begin to create. So now who do I want to become based on what I have in front of me today, right? So based on who is sitting here today, who do I want to be tomorrow? Now that I have a better sense or a greater sense of my role and how I see myself in society and how I see my life. Now, what do I want my life to become? What do I want to do with this life? And then I think we start creating ourselves, right? We start deciding that I want to be seen as XYZ. I want to be able to do XYZ. So I want to be able to change the world, so to speak, if that's the goal for someone. And then someone might say, I want to be president, or I want to be prime minister, or I want to be a government minister, or I want to be a pastor, every time, or a priest, or a high school principal, or a teacher, and when someone selects a role in society, whether it's professional or personal, right? So a husband, a wife, a partner, whatever the case is. When someone selects a role, what they're doing is, to me, that is the creation process. It says that this is now where I want to take my life. And by taking my life in this direction, right, you're creating this whole idea of who you are. So I really think it's a mixture of both. I think to to be able to create self, we must first be able to determine who is self, right? So if that makes sense. So I must know where I stand before I decide where I want to go. And maybe it makes sense, right? And maybe life then makes some kind of rational sense to me. I have to decide first who I am, which is the figuring out of self. And then when I figured out self and I've decided like this is who I am, then I decide this is where I want to go. And then that becomes the creation of self, right? I hope that makes sense to you. So we discover self in order to be able to create the self that we really want. Because you could discover something about you and then you don't accept it, right? I think a lot of times, and that's where people struggle with some things. They've discovered certain things about themselves. They've discovered like this is who I am, right? And then they realize that who they are doesn't quite fit into what society considers good, or what society considers acceptable, or whatever the case is. And then there's that struggle, that internal struggle then to how do you then find your place now, right? Within society, having, that internal debate. How do you then create a good self? Let's look at it like that. How do you then create, right, this good self, the person that you want to be, when you're struggling to accept what you have found? All right. Actually, I kind of like that, right? So I have found this. Society says to me, this is not necessarily great. Do I accept what society says, or do I then take what I have found, me, self, the way I am, and create something with that self that then makes me happy? And that is where a lot of people struggle. That's where a lot of people struggle, because they sometimes discover and realize, you know what, this is who I am. This is what I want to be. And it doesn't fit into the narrative that their families or friends or society in general considers to be whatever, right? Acceptable, or whatever the case is. And this could be a lot of things. This could be sexuality. This could be wanting to marry outside of your race or religion, and it not necessarily being accepted within the family. It could be a number of things. So you've discovered self, you've discovered who you love, you've discovered who you are, you've discovered all that type of stuff, and then society or your family or whoever says, I'm not sure about that. How do you create self after that, right? And is that creation then based on what makes you happy or what makes other people happy? And that's where we run into a lot of trouble. So look, the second part to this could be a completely separate video by itself, so I'll stop right here. But just to kind of recap real quick, let me know what you think To what extent are we creating, are we finding ourselves? And then after we found ourselves, to what extent are we then creating ourselves, creating who we are? I believe it's a blend of both, and it's a mixture. So leave your comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. Please turn on your post notifications because I post every single day. Also, please do not forget to hit the like button and share the videos because it really does help the channel grow. So I'll really appreciate it if you hit the like button and share the videos. Check out my other videos. I have a lot more videos, a lot more content that you can look at. And if you have any video ideas or suggestions that you like for me to make, please leave them in the comments. Until next time, peace.